Wait for it. Wait for it. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to talk about this here Kickstarter that Mr. Matthew Jasso is doing, but first he's going to introduce himself. And you wouldn't believe this. This is the third take, and every time I pronounce his name wrong, but different. So one of these days,
of the offensive ways my name has been said, it's been the least offensive the way you've messed it up. So don't worry about that.
All right, I will take that as a win.
Yes, my name is Matthew Jasso. I'm a freelance writer, currently talking about a Kickstarter campaign for Grunt Comics. Name of the comic is Black Cobra. But I have done some work with your fellow co-host here, Nick, and maybe one of these days I'll do stuff with other people, but because sometimes I don't like a lot of other people, it may not happen. We'll see.
All right, and we like Matt so much. Do you prefer Matt or Matthew? I should ask that too, I suppose.
I'm indifferent. Go.
All right, whatever I say then. We're going to stumble along and pretend.
Just not Jasso, no.
Hey, Nick, and it's early enough we're recording this, I can't even blame alcohol because we're all stone cold sober.
Oh, yeah, I'm drinking 7-Up over here, man.
All right. So the next part of the introduction with Matthew is how Matthew and Nick hooked up. So, Nick, where did you stumble across him? Because this is one you booked.
Grinder.
We were two wayward travelers. ended up in a seedy bar in Facebook land and started talking about our troubles and errors and our passions.
Exactly.
And then we started writing. Then we started work. We were like, hey, we should make a comic book together. And he goes, that sounds lovely. And then I was like,
okay. I don't see why not.
And the rest is history. It's been a couple of years. We met online. We run in the same independent creator circles, and it's a very small community. And you run into folks, and you get a good vibe off each other, and you start creating shit.
Yeah, it was actually funny because I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What all have you done together?
We're in the midst of. Can we say?
Yeah.
We're in the midst of a project called Quickwire. It is it's a new character for Apogee Comics. It's the first speedster that they're doing.
Yes, the very first speedster.
But it has been like 5 or 6 years of us just randomly talking. And then one day I was trying to go to bed and I just get a message on Twitter that says, hey, you're writing this book for me. And the rest is history.
Yeah. And he was like, okay, when do we start? I'm like, we started yesterday.
Yeah, this is what he looks like. His name's this. Go do something. But yeah, so it's been interesting. I think it's been probably about a year-ish that we've been working on it because I think we developed it, kind of came up with some ideas, and then it just happened to be that you called me 2 or 3 weeks after I got hired by Grok, and then 2 weeks after that I got hired by another company. So it was like 3 or 4 different out of the blue, hey, come write this, while also working on some other things. And it was just like, oh, okay, I guess how it goes. So it took me a little longer than I wanted to first one, but we're going on to number 2 and see where it takes us.
Yeah,
so
I love what's going on in that book too. It's hilarious.
Well, thank you.
In this one and in all of them, you're a writer for the comics, and Nick, you're drawing them. Is that how this is working?
We're waiting on some proofs from an artist that we wanted to work on Quickwire. He's got his own thing going on, so he hasn't. I'm going to give him a little bit more time, and then I'm just going to say F it and start drawing it myself.
Yeah, okay. But as far as me, I am not an artist at all. I am only a writer. I've tried the art thing a couple times, and I think one time I was like, you know what? I'm just going to teach myself to draw. I took a year to learn how to draw, and then finally I was like, all right, it's been a year. I'm going to draw this book. And I started drawing the first panel and realized that I had taught myself how to draw people, but nothing else. So you can't draw a comic and only draw the people. And I was like, forget it. That's when I eventually got into the creator groups and started trying to find an artist.
I've seen a lot of indie comics out there that the characters are just flopping around in empty space.
It's true. But I was
I've seen it. They don't do well, but I've seen it.
So before we get too deep into this one, we do have the religion questions because we are the Blasters and Blades podcast. And I just want you to know, Matthew, that there is a wrong answer on all of these questions. So I hope you're ready for this.
Let's go.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or
Star
Firefly?
Wars. You didn't have to finish that. It's Star Wars.
Okay. What about Star Wars speaks to you?
One more time.
What is it about Star Wars that speaks to you?
Han Solo, Millennium Falcon. If he's not in it, I'm really not going to entertain it. But also, I like the Jedis. I'm martial artist since I was a kid. Any kind of hand-to-hand combat kind of thing I'm all in. So that's like the prequels suck, but the sword fights are kind of cool. And that's what, in my opinion, the sequel trilogy. Like, I don't know how you went from really cool sword fights or saber fights in the first prequel trilogy that are crappy movies, and then you had time to train these people, but I don't know what you trained them to do because the lightsaber battles and new stuff's horrible. But yeah, I really like all that lore. I think my favorite thing to do is to watch the first Star Wars movie and really want to see the movies that film is based on, because I don't think even Empire and Return of the Jedi are kind of, he mixed them around and did what he wanted to do. But there's some really interesting lore told in that movie that I don't think we'll ever get to see.
For me, I always like the Empire, the uniforms, the military, like although in George Lucas, as much as we rag on Disney, and I'm sorry, we watched Ahsoka, Nick and I did, for a review episode, and those sword fights or saber fight, what is it? Lightsaber fights. There we go. It's like it was watching it in slow motion. I'm like, I get if you have to go slow because the actors need to whatever safety, you could speed it up in editing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the headdress or if she's just not comfortable with the sabers. Rosario Dawson and I don't know if it was her or whatever. They weren't where they could have been. And again, I think I made the joke after watching the first 2 episodes of that show. It's like, is Nick Gillard dead? Like, why hasn't anybody called him?
Yeah.
So I never want to blame the actors when lately Hollywood has just been giving bad scripts. So for all we know, she was capable of going from 0 to 60 and they just didn't want her to. Like, so I don't want to blame the actress when it could just be she literally gave the script exactly as they wanted it. So that goes to the director always and forever.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's her fault per se. I'm just saying, like, even like, look, I've done film, I've done things, I've seen actors who can and can't do stuff. And it's like, if it's important, somebody will make sure it happens. You know what I mean? Whether it's she didn't take enough time, whether the stunt people didn't take enough time, somebody dropped the ball and the sword fights just aren't where they could have been. But that's just me. And you, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, like you said, the Empire, like you look at it kidnapping kids. I always kind of thought the Empire was the good guys in this one. They were just trying to keep peace in a galaxy that was in chaos, and the Jedi were kind of a loose cannon. I don't know. Like, so the stormtroopers always spoke to me.
I mean, I spent 3 months playing TIE Fighter, really trying to wonder why all these terrorists kept attacking the ships before I realized I was killing rebels. So I feel it.
I mean, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of room in that universe to dive into the nuance of international or sub and intergalactic politics and perspective, and you know what I mean. Like, it's definitely interesting. I watched this movie last night called The Old Guard about these immortals that are fighting.
Yes, great comic. Great movie. I thought the movie was
a comic. Good. Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out too. But they asked her, the new girl asks the older Scythian warrior, are they the good guys? And the two crusaders, both the Islamic side and the Christian side, that are some of the immortals. They're like, well, it depends on the century. Are we the good guys or the bad guys? We just try to do the right thing. And that kind of spoke to me about the whole concept of international or intergalactic, if you're talking sci-fi politics, because perspective is important.
Yeah.
I like, so as much as I like reading about the TIE fighters, I also enjoyed reading about Rogue Squadron in the old books. Like, there's a lot of nuance there that gets ignored in modern retelling. It's a shame.
Yeah.
So, all right, we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or The Chronicles of Narnia?
Star Wars.
That's all I like.
Okay.
I guess Narnia of those, just because my kids like them. There we go. Is that good enough?
That's good enough. And
That
that is the new
works.
stand-in for Lord of the Rings, because when you throw that in there, everyone just says that, and it's just really not fair to all the other great stuff out there. And
Yeah.
so we had 9 different guests reach out and say, well, why not? If you're looking for a classic, iconic, and as large a statute as the other 3, the 3 you listed, why not Chronicles of Narnia? And I'm like, how did we not think of it? So now that is the new official first-time religion question for all of our new guests. So
Nice.
we got to try it out with you.
See,
So,
what you need to
it
do is
worked.
you need to do this question: Thundercats, He-Man, or Black Star?
Ooh,
Thundercats! Ho!
I don't know. It's a toss-up between He-Man and Thundercats.
I'm still mad at He-Man. I hold a grudge. That mother got me in trouble.
He-Man
I don't know
did?
that.
Okay, I got myself in trouble, but it's still his fault. I blame him.
Oh, okay. He's the
Okay.
scapegoat. Got it.
Were you
So-
running around in a purple shirt saying your name was Prince Adam, even though you did nothing to try and disguise your look?
So when I was a kid, they had a 1-800 or 1-900 number, whatever it was, but it's one you got to pay
yeah,
for.
you told me about this.
Yeah,
Oh, you
and
dumbass.
you, if you call, you could talk to He-Man, but ask your mom and dad first. Well, first off, no one's calling if they ask their mom and dad first. They know that. We know that. We want to pretend everybody didn't know that. So I skipped school to call that number, and I didn't even get to talk to He-Man. I got grounded. I had to pay my mom back. I had to mow a lot of yards and shovel a lot of dog crap of all the neighborhood to pay that back. Probably paid
My
more
Lord.
because my mom wanted to teach me about interest as part of this punishment. And I didn't even get to talk to him. It was a pre-recorded, drink your Ovaltine type message. I was,
Yeah.
I'm still bitter.
Man.
Still bitter.
Hey, you think you have an axe to grind? I'm still Paul Bunyan over here that Jason Todd came back to life. I paid good money to kill that fool.
Fair,
Yeah.
fair. All right. And because we are civilized here at the Blast and Blade podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Sir, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Coffee. And
Nice.
I take it with sugar-free syrups because my wife gave up sugar years ago, and now I can only use the sugar-free stuff. And yes, it is a Big Lebowski coffee cup
Nice.
because the dude abides.
You can tell he's married because when they asked him why he gave it up, he said, because my wife. She's on a diet, so I'm on a diet.
It just reminds me of Pulp Fiction. It's like, I don't usually get a good burger because my girlfriend's vegetarian, which pretty much makes me a vegetarian. But I do love a tasty burger.
It's actually interesting because she got the whole pump set up and everything like that.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, I try to do sugar after now, and it doesn't even taste the same. I'd rather do the sugar-free
Yeah.
syrups. The Toscani, Torino, whatever they're called.
I'm familiar. So, all right. So let's dive right in. I've got to pull the art up. But before we dive into your comic, which is the Remnant Black Cobra, it's the first book in the series, if I'm understanding correctly, right?
Yeah, Black Cobra #1. There is a Black Cobra #0 that's kind of a prequel that came out years ago. But as far as the actual comic itself, Black Cobra #1 is #1, so it's the first one. So we'll see if it continues.
So where did the idea? That's where we're gonna. Well, first off, I suppose we should ask, what is the age range? Because not all comics are created equal. Some of them are not child friendly. So what would you rate this as on a rating scale?
Well, I would say it's PG because it's this is the Remnant or Universe Comics or Grot Comics. The Remnant characters, they are a Christian-based comic. Now, it doesn't mean they're spouting scripture or kind of going over the top with that, but it is ultimately a world where the heroes are Christian and they fight, the bad guys with Christian values as far as like they're not going to murder anybody, they don't curse. Trust me, it's been difficult writing sometimes. I'm like, man, I'm a cursing kind of guy. So trying to get some of these guys to stay within the confines of that. But it's so the idea of this guy is that he was actually captured by the Watchers, who are the villains of the story, but in the public eye are viewed as heroes. They are a superhero group that work for the UN, and because the UN and members of the UN and the Watchers themselves are technically evil, the Remnant are looked at as like outlaws, as terrorists. So Black Cobra was captured by the Watchers. He was tortured for I think weeks, months. And because of that, he deals now with a lot of PTSD. So this issue actually chronicles the first time he actually is in the field after he's begun the process of dealing with this PTSD.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. It's like reverse Thunderbolts.
That's deep. So you mentioned that you're the writer. What can you tell us about whoever did your art? And as you answer that, I'm going to scroll through some of the art that we snagged from your Kickstarter.
Sure, no problem. So on this picture here, I believe, if memory serves, is drawn by Ron Williams. He does part 2. No, I'm sorry. He does the 4th part. So the comic has 4 parts. The standard Black Cobra #1 has 3 parts to it, all 3 of which I wrote. If you get the extended edition of Black Cobra, it includes some of the stuff from Black Cobra #0, and then it also includes an extended story written by Patrick Daniel that Ron Williams does the art on. A guy named Luciano did the main story, which is a 12-pager, where he fights Jaguar Lynx, the guy in the orange and the blue, and then David Lee is drawing the part 2, which is, pardon me, is kind of tells the story of Jaguar Lynx and where he goes after the things that happen in part 1. And then part 3 is being drawn by Geraldo. Not even going to try and butcher his last name. And he's going to, that is a story of Black Cobra now dealing with, hey, he kind of messed up on his first outing, and he's trying to talk to another character from the Remnant, a girl named Jellybean, and she deals with her own PTSD from her background. And she's kind of passing on his whole, like, this is how I'm dealing with it. You need to be better at dealing with it, because if you do that, then you're able to control not only your emotions, but your powers. And you can use some of these feelings to enhance what you can do.
Okay. Is that a theme of the whole universe, or just this particular?
Just this particular character. He's the one that deals with PTSD. Most of the other characters, the Christian and environment, the Christian values, is just an excuse to have some great action and tell some really cool storylines. It's just this particular character, because of his story, is kind of dealing with that. But there's, I think if you really look at any kind of Christianity, a lot of it's about redemption. Not getting too deep into it, but we're not worthy until we accept Jesus, blah, blah, yakety schmaggety. But I think that's where that kind of comes from, is, pardon me, is that a lot of these are redemptive stories. Even the main leader, Grok himself, he has a very, very redemptive story. And then there's other characters that are just like, I'm a hero. I'm not going to kill anybody. Let me go fight crime. And that's what they do.
Okay. Yeah. So from the art on this one, I'm definitely getting some Miles Morales, which is one of the Spider-Man mini reboots. It's got like bazillion of them. Meets a little bit of Cobra from the G.I. Joe.
Yeah, this guy, he's about 28 years old. He's been a superhero for a while. He was actually mentored by several of the other members, mainly Southhawk, who's kind of like the Remnant's resident mentor type guy, who has brought in a lot of the characters into the team and helped train them. So yeah. And then because I liked his look, when it came to the action, I was like, you know what? It's easy to do standard Taekwondo stuff. So I made him do a bunch of like capoeira stuff. So I even had him do like a Frankensteiner, which, if you don't know, is when you do a forward flip and grab somebody with your legs and then flip them over. So I really get into my action, let me tell you.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool design on the costume. I like the little jewels around his neck. Gives me kind of a Black Panther vibe. Then he's got a
Cobra on his chest, and then it's like he's got a claw on each arm that comes out of his gauntlets, and then on each leg he has like the rib cage claw, teeth marks. So I think he has a really cool look.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, when Bill asked me to draw one of his characters, he gave me Southhawk. So
yeah, I remember.
I was like, there's not much to him on his design. I would have loved to have a crack at this guy though.
No, he's pretty cool. I like this guy, and the thing for me is, especially when you're, I think one of the more difficult things is like when you have a guy with claws, but he's supposed to not kill people. You really have to pick what he does with those things.
Yeah. What's the point of the claws if he's not killing people? Let's be real.
I mean, you stab him in the leg, incapacitate them, stab them through the shoulder so they can't hit you back. You can do it. You can do it.
Wounds.
Okay. Death by paper cuts minus the death part.
There
Pretty
you go.
Much. Just to the edge of the death.
Yeah. Just because you're crippled doesn't mean you died. So we're still within Christian values.
Okay.
That's really cool.
So when you
what
say
I've
Christian
seen.
values, you mean like New Testament God is love, not Old Testament fire and brimstone? Because I mean, there's some pretty dark stuff in the original text material, if you would.
Yes, this is post fatherhood God, not pre fatherhood God.
I'm just saying there's room for lots of fire and brimstone if you wanted to under that banner.
No, there's not that yet.
So this is more Protestant Christianity and less guilt and
correct
involved. Okay.
It's like I said, I think it's more, in my opinion, what it is, and which I really like, is it's more about good guys being good and bad guys being bad. That's kind of really the setup.
I don't think needs to be, religiously rooted. There are plenty of people of other faith backgrounds that also believe good is good and bad is bad. So I like that you're distinguishing that from some of the, quite frankly, poorly written religious fiction that's just trying to retell scripture with funny pictures or fancy settings.
Yeah, it's not the action Bible. Don't worry.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that if you like it. I'm just saying
And I think that's something that a lot of people get confused in when you say it's a Christian-based comic, is that they're expecting the action Bible, and it's like, no, that's not exactly what we're doing here.
It's Christian superheroes. Not superheroes that are uber Christian. So it is. I mean, look, I've written episodes where one dude attacked a Yakuza headquarters and whipped the crap out of everybody. I mean, it's not anything that's very limited. I've written episodes where they're just talking and trying to figure out how to best proceed with not being overly evil, or having two of the heroes run into a vigilante and they do a team up, and in the middle of the team up, he shoots somebody in the head, and they get on his case about, like, there's no reason for you to kill people. So it's been a very interesting ride, but it also is, when you're challenged to, okay, how do I make these stories interesting and cool and fun and not succumb to some of the standard tropes that most comic books do. Look, Wolverine's great and we like him, but we want to watch him just murder rampage with his claws out. That's not going to happen with Black Cobra. He's got the claws, but he doesn't have the murder rampage.
Okay. Well, I know everyone, that's some good black and white line art too. Does that get colored in? It was on your Kickstarter page, or is that just a step in the process?
That has been colored. Honestly, I'm just a freelance writer, so I didn't have a lot to do with all the stuff that was put on the Kickstarter page. I was suggested some of the different tiers, but when it comes to the art and things like that, that's Bill that puts a lot of that stuff up there. Yeah. But I have seen this in color. It looks pretty cool.
That is a very Wrightson inspired.
Oh yeah.
Piece of artwork there. I like
that. I could see that. Very Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah.
So I will say, before we move on, and I don't think we need to harp on the religious stuff too much, but with the religion, like you mentioned, the action Bible, which, is kind of cringe, and the crappy Hallmark movies that are, religiously inspired. But for every one of those bad ones out there, there is J.R. Tolkien, and I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name that wrote Narnia, which were also religious allegories, but well done. And the Golden Compass was another one.
Golden Compass is actually about atheism.
But I'm just saying that they were inspired.
I did too, but yeah. C.S. Lewis. Sorry, I had to look it up. C.S. Lewis is who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh, good, because you were Googling quicker than me. But the point is that you can cover those themes in ways that are respectful of your audience, that don't preach at them, and still make entertaining stories outside of all of it. And so I think the genre writ large gets a bad name because of all the badness that's out, the badly done visions of it, to the point where people that write that don't always want to advertise it because of that stigma. And I like that you guys are leaning into, no, we can do this and still do this well and make you enjoy the story, even if you're an atheist or agnostic or insert any other religion you want to.
Yeah, and that's why I ultimately, like, just because they're Christian superheroes doesn't mean you have to be a Christian to enjoy it or anything. Like, it's just cool. And again, what I was saying before is, like, I just want to tell entertaining superhero stories, and I'm doing that just within the confines of the rules that have been set for this universe. I'm never going to be able to do a Doctor Strange kind of hero. I can make a villain that looks like Doctor Strange or does Doctor Strange stuff, but I can't do a hero like that, which means I just, okay, well then how do I do that? And then, go from there. And that's been a lot of the fun, to be honest with you. Like I said, is just having that moment of like, okay, if I want to do a Road Warrior-esque, street brawl between trucks and cars, how do I do that and not have them kill people? Or have them battling on top of a truck, and you can't have them kick somebody off the truck because that would probably kill them. So it's like stuff like that that's been a lot of fun to kind of, oh my God, I can't remember the freaking. It's like necessity is the mother of invention. Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what's been a lot of fun in this is like, okay, how do I tell this story within that? So it's been fun. And, like I said, I love action, so I'm just going to go nuts no matter what we do.
Absolutely.
That's fair.
I've noticed
that. So, Nick, do you have any official verdict on the art?
The art's fantastic. Because I follow Bill and Matthew on the socials. I get to see the progression of this stuff from pencils to inks to colors, and it's been fantastic every step of the way. Bill has a really good knack of hiring talented people to work on his books, myself included. The art's amazing. It always is. It always pops. He always puts together a good team.
He's found a couple really good colorists that I've seen save some stuff that was like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Nick, you know what I mean? It's like you get an artist, and if they're all right, but if you get the right colorist, it just kind of like
he can save bad art. Yeah. He can like an inker will save bad pencils, and a colorist can save the whole thing if you have bad pencils and bad inks. You get a good colorist on it, they'll elevate the artwork and really make it pop and make it interesting and make you want to buy it. But I've seen the reverse of that too. So like you could have awesome pencils and awesome inks, and then you get a subpar colorist on there, and your artwork looks like trash.
Yeah. So you're right.
Bill doesn't have that problem.
No. He's got a pretty good team there, and even if there's somebody who's not there, we'll just be like, well, we'll just use them for this 2-pager, and then we'll see him later.
Yeah. We'll give him a soft exit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quiet
so
firing.
We're going to pause real quick, and we're going to let Matthew, no pressure, he's going to read the commercial because you got the video, don't you, Nick?
We got the video.
We got video!
We got the video. Just keep talking while I set it up.
All right. So when we come back from the commercial, and the commercial is going to be the video from the Remnant's Kickstarter page. But once we show that, we're going to come back and start talking about the origins of this universe and all the universe implies. Because we've talked a lot about the art, and that's all well and good, but none of that matters if the story sucks. So that's what we're going to talk about next. No pressure, Nick, but the clock is ticking.
I'm trying. Oh, there we go. All right.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video about the campaign for Black.
Wait a minute. There we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video about the campaign for Black Cobra #1. My name is Matthew Jasso, and I'm a freelance writer for Grog Comics. I'm the one that wrote Black Cobra #1. If you get the extended edition, there's an additional story written by Patrick and also some additional storylines from other issues that weren't written by me, but we'll get into that in a few moments. Black Cobra #1 has 3 different parts. Part 1 is about Black Cobra's first mission back in the field after having dealt with some PTSD issues.
We're going after the others. Don't let him get away.
I got him.
His first outing puts him at odds with Jaguar Lynx. Their first battle doesn't exactly go very well for them.
So how long do you think you can hold it up before we're both crushed to death?
I will not die from this.
How long?
8 minutes, maybe. two of them want to let us both die out of spite.
Now that they're trapped in rubble, we get to see how this hero and maybe rival instead of villain kind of deal with the situation. Part 2 of Black Cobra, number 1, deals with Jaguar Lynx and the repercussions of how his life has changed after everything that happened in Part 1, and he gets a visit from a surprise character of Grunt Comics. Part 3 of Black Cobra number 1 is Black Cobra dealing with another member of the Remnant who is dealing with PTSD themselves, and how the shared trauma between the two, though not similar, is able to bring them together as they learn how to deal with not only their trauma, but focus some of that energy into their powers. There's an extended edition of Black Cobra number 1. It's going to include some of the storyline from Remnant number 2 that deals with what happened to Black Cobra that caused all of his trauma. In addition, there is a brand new script written by another writer that kind of has Dr. Sonia Rivendell covering the case of Black Cobra to a new character who we will see in future issues. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. The link for the Kickstarter campaign, you'll find it below. Anything you can do to support us is perfect, whether you're going to buy into one of the tiers or you just want to like, follow, and share anything that we post. Anything you can do is very appreciated. There will be a live Q&A on November 10th. Details for that will be coming soon. Until next time, see you then. What a hack. Absolute hack.
I mean, you missed a wonderful opportunity to go all old school and do like the pow, psh, all the visual
the
things.
Onomatopoeias coming up.
Yeah, that would have been so glorious. You could have like tied into the olden days of the genre. So first off, you mentioned this is inspired by the sort of thou shalt not kill, the religiosity. But there were larger morals based on our pre-show conversation. So what kind of overall moral lesson are you going for?
Got me now? Sorry, my thing. Got me?
So this is what happens when you're on the standing desk and you bounce around like a kid with ADHD.
Yeah, I know. It does. If I wasn't drinking coffee and a ferret on espresso, maybe this wouldn't happen so much. Yeah, there is a lot of morals in here, especially in this particular issue, just because I think too often we get into these things of like, these are villains or these are bad guys. And given the background of somebody like Jaguar Lynx is the Watchers from public appearance are the good guys. They're the Avengers, So if you have superpowers and you want to make a change or do something more, like it looks really appealing to do this. And then Apollyon, who's the leader of the Watchers, is one of these guys who's like, oh, hey, you have powers, bro. You need to come with us. We've got all these things. We can help you. We'll train you, blah, blah, blah. And then once you get into it, it's like the frog in the boiling water. It's like, no, we're going to go solve this problem. Oh, by the way, when we solve this problem, we have to do this. We have to do that. And then suddenly you're like, did we just murder a building full of people to ensure this agenda that the Watchers have? And I think that's where Jaguar Lynx is. With that in mind, you get into this big battle. What happens to them and they get trapped? Now you have just this moment of like, okay, let me talk to this person. Let me see what's actually happening with them and if I can help them. And that's kind of what I liked about this particular story is you have this really cool fight scene, but most of it, the push of the story is, not so much can you redeem a villain, but if you take the time to find out what's actually happening with them, can you change them as well?
I like that.
But also,
your fault.
bunch of martial arts action.
It's your fault because then I muted myself and forgot to unmute. So we're like just the Boomer show, the Boomer podcast right now. But I do like that moral ambiguity because sometimes the line between good and evil and right and wrong is gray and murky, and it's kind of hard to figure out, where those dotted lines are. And sometimes you can end up doing the wrong thing for the right reasons and vice versa. I like that you're diving into that. Too often the good and evil trope is literally like mustache twirling villain, and it's so comically done that it's not as relatable. I like when they show the nuance where even the villain has parts about him that you could kind of like. And it's that old expression where, you know, every villain's a hero in his own mind, in his own story.
We're all righteous.
That's right.
So I really enjoy that you're doing that. So
Well, and I also, sorry to interrupt, but I also like, oh man, I interrupted and lost my train of thought. What the crap? That's awesome.
this is how you know we're professionals here, people.
I slipped
That's
on
right.
my beans.
So where is the okay? So first off, where did the idea for the larger Remnant universe come from? And if possible, what is your role in it? And then narrowing that down, then for this character Black Cobra, can you give us that for people that don't know this universe?
I can give you a little bit of it. So I've only been working for Grok for the past year. He had already been in operation for several years up to that point. And a lot of that development of the world and the storylines before I came on board was all Bill. So I didn't come up with any of this universe. Since I've been working with him, I have been able to kind of steer the ship a little bit and kind of come up with some other things that might work. Like this Black Cobra story was literally him saying, hey, write a story about this character that introduces Jaguar Lynx. That was all that he gave me. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, is he a hero or a villain? Does Jaguar, because it's kind of funny because Bill has this really, in my opinion, cool website where you can see every single character that's a hero and a villain. Well, Jaguar Lynx is on the hero side. But he was like, well, he's the villain in the story. And my thing I don't like, I think this is what I was going to say before, is like, I personally don't like, I'm a good guy, you're a bad guy, I'm going to make you a good guy at the end of the movie. Because that's not how that works. Most people, if they're villains, you're not going to just like say like, oh, but this. And they go, oh, you're right, I'm wrong, and change. So I didn't want this to end with Jaguar Lynx saying, cool, we're chums. I want to see that process. And even by the end of the issue with the other three stories, he's not necessarily a good guy. He doesn't suddenly just join the group and become part of the Remnant. He's going on his own journey. And that was really important to me because like, I'm pretty active in my church because my wife totally is a Baptist, and part of us being together is we've agreed to raise our children in that fashion. So I do the VBS, the Vacation Bible School for them. And we've done superheroes a couple times. And I tried to go really broad one year and nobody got what I was selling. So the next time we did it, I kind of made it a little smaller. But again, I really wanted to do a vigilante who becomes a hero, not a villain who becomes a hero, because nobody can relate to being the villain per se. You can't tell a bunch of 5-year-olds, this is the bad guy, we suddenly made him good, but they can understand like, hey, this guy is misguided. We're going to give him information and then he can come back to where he needs to be. And that's where this kind of came from, is that idea of you're just turning the wheel a little bit to right the ship toward where it needs to go. But there's still a journey for Jaguar Lynx before if he ever decides to become a member of the Remnant. You're muted
That
again.
makes sense.
I wasn't speaking yet. Nick was about to say something though. So the Remnant then is the organization of good guys. The Watcher is the organization of quasi bad guys, totally not related to the Highlander.
No.
And so are they all taking place in the same city?
It's yes-ish. So it's kind of like the Remnant is the overall team, but there are sub-teams in that. And each sub-team kind of covers a different area. So the Remnant so the Remnant's kind of like your big Avengers Tower. Well, not Avengers Tower, but main group. And then there's Dog and the Regulators, who are like the urban team. I'm sorry. Yeah, the urban team, who are more like in the downtown bad area trying to do good against that kind of stuff. And then you've got
so you got like your street level heroes, your larger threat heroes, and then you got your intergalactic, or
you've got your street level, and then I'm even now trying to get I want to do something where it's like almost like a special missions force where they're being sent to go do things, not just waiting, because sometimes it's reactive. They're waiting around for the Watchers to do something, they're going to go stop them. But now, like a team like Dog and the Regulators, there's a last gen team that's kind of like the youthful team. And then there's other characters that get their own series. So that's where, but yeah, it's like all kind of in the same city.
Yeah,
but
you guys are all hitting the major designations of
yes,
like what a lot of the other companies have. Not saying that's a bad thing. We all just kind of naturally steer towards like, okay, I got like this Superman character that's for the really big threats, but is he going to go around and stop the purse snatcher? No, I got my street level dudes for that. And
yeah.
then I got these guys that like you said, like a strike team, like an X-Force.
Yeah.
It's like these are the guys that we want them to do our will and stuff that we normally wouldn't handle.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be associated with these guys, but they're going to do what we want.
Yeah. My two favorite characters are named Silent and Night, and they're members of they're members of the Regulators, but hopefully they will be able to do stories of them going on their own missions. And the way I describe them is like, you're going to tell them to go do the thing you need them to do. And then you're going to turn around and just wait for them to be done, because you don't want to see what they do.
Because
they're going to do it.
Nice.
Yeah. And not even very nice, but they're going to do the dumbest crap, whatever. They're absolutely, ridiculous. So I've had fun working on that, but I think that's where like you were saying, there's tropes in there and you can play with those tropes, but also have fun with the tropes.
Yeah. And make them unique to your story. So
correct.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. Because you see, I mean, I'm a big fan of like imitation is the biggest form of flattery, but there's only so far you can go before it looks like you're ripping people off or ripping characters off. So yeah, it's a balancing act and it's a fine one. And it looks like from what you've been doing and what Grunt's doing with his books, he's got a pretty good balance on that.
Yeah, and it's also like, as doing some of the story editor stuff I do and some of the scripts that I read, sometimes you have to go like, okay, look, this is too much. Like the big conversation when I first got the story editor job, I was going through all these submissions, and there's a couple of the scripts that I would go like, this isn't a script about this character, because there's a character called Thief of the Night. He's kind of like a vigilante kind of street level character.
Yeah.
But I would read, there was like 2 or 3 scripts people had sent in, and it was literally like they had an idea for a Batman story and they just put this character in it. Like nothing about this story said it's about this character. It was more of a story that I want to do a vigilante story. And
they wrote fanfic and then replaced the like hugely copyrighted character with Thief.
Correct. Yeah. And it was just like, I was like, no, you wanted to write a Batman story. And I would just tell them like, hey, this is too derivative. Like you guys need to actually write a story about this character. Go read the bio. Like the bio's there. It's not that difficult.
So before we start talking about the Kickstarter, is since you do the editing for the story submissions, when you are looking for stories, are you looking at it from, we want artists to come in and draw the things, or we want aspiring comic book writers to come and write the scripts, or both?
It's a mix. Like I don't do any of the art per se. Like I've suggested people, and it's always fun to go like, hey, do you have any sequential art? No. Oh, okay. Bye.
What do you mean sequential art?
That's the actual interior pages of the comic book. Like when you mention speculative fiction, and it covers that area. When we say sequential art in the art world, the comic book world, we mean interior artwork. So can you tell a story in the visual medium?
Yeah. So like in 5 panels, do the 5 panels tell a story, or did you just draw random things that don't mean anything?
So my understanding from what you guys are saying, for people that aren't, steeped in comics, the skill of drawing one static picture and drawing a series of pictures in a row to tell a story are not linked necessarily.
Correct. Because sometimes you'll get a guy who, I can draw this figure in 3 positions and put a different outfit on him. And he's done those poses so many times that it looks amazing. And then you're like, okay, cool. I need you to draw a guy sitting down at a computer, and they can't do it. because they're just
talking on a telephone.
Yeah, it's like I don't know how much of this video, but like the guy's here or he's here or he's like this. You're like, cool, those all look great, but I need somebody doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they can't do it because they haven't learned to draw. They've just learned to do what's called a pinup or a splash page, which makes you look cool but doesn't tell a story.
So I know one of the things as the trad pub on the writing side continues to crumble at the altar of poor decision making, they're losing what they used to do was what they used to do sort of mentor or shepherd newer creators into the field. So like, okay, yeah, you're not going to sell 1 billion copies right out the gate, but we can teach you to do better and build you as a brand. Does the comic book industry still do that? And if not, does your publishing house?
Perfect example, Jim Lee. Jim Lee did not start out as Jim Lee.
Obviously.
He was doing some things, like he did a short story in Atlantis Attacks, which was a Marvel annual in 1987. And he did a 4-page story insert in there of Daredevil. And if you compared that to his work now, night and day. Couldn't even tell it was Jim Lee. Yeah. In fact, I didn't even know it was Jim Lee until a buddy of mine was like, that's Jim Lee's debut in Marvel. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. And I ran to my long boxes and pulled it out. There it was.
Hey, you want to go even further back. You know what his first ever thing at Marvel was? Did you ever read the Transformers comics at all?
Yeah, I've seen them.
So there's a cover where Galvatron is standing on Earth and he's holding up the Matrix.
Yeah,
that's Jim Lee's first work at Marvel.
Oh,
he drew that cover.
Actually, that might be in my long box too.
Yeah, it was.
So, yeah,
clearly, I don't know enough about Marvel because I thought Jim Lee was the creator, founder, and owner of Marvel. I didn't realize.
That's Stan Lee.
Okay.
Jim Lee is Korean. Stan Lee is Jewish.
The General Lee is the car that the Dukes of Hazzard drove. Just to
I knew that one too, and Daisy Dukes, but men of a certain age.
But to answer your question, Jared, yeah, there's like a minor league for comic artists and writers. They'll put them on stuff that, it's not a bestseller or anything like that.
Or it's an anthology series. Like it used to be Marvel. Marvel had a series called Marvel Comics Presents, and each comic had 3 short stories. And that was usually your testing grounds. And it's kind of funny. I think about this in the 80s and early 90s is like they would test out people in Marvel Presents. And if you did really well, then you got an issue of What If. And now you're doing the entire issue. And if that went well, then they gave you a title. Because like Rob Liefeld, he did his bread and, kind of worked on Marvel Presents, got that episode of What If Wolverine joined an Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then within months, he's on X-Force or on New Mutants, which eventually becomes X-Force.
Yeah. Created the 2 most popular characters of that brand.
Yeah.
Cable and Deadpool. And then, he became part of the trinity of rock stars. That was.
Yeah. And then Image happens and blah, blah, yakety schmaggety.
That's a whole other episode too, talking about Image.
So
yeah, there's like a AAA team, and that's kind of the
so does your publishing house do that kind of, if new creators wanted to come to your, publishing empire?
Absolutely.
As it were.
Rock stars from the start. No, I'm just
yeah. If you don't have that pedigree, we don't want anything to do with you. No, for me, there's been a couple times when Bill's like, hey, work with this person. See if you can get them better at the writing. And there's been 2 or 3 people we've done that with, and only one is still around. Because more often than not, writers can't take it. And there's one in particular that like he sent a script in, and he was one of the people who did here's my ultra violent vigilante story. And then I had to respond to him like, hey, the name of the website is Tribulation Task Force. One of the guys has a giant cross on his chest. Like let's read the room and just you're so hungry to get a job, you're not paying attention to what the job is. So I responded, I was like, hey, this is a Christian comic. They don't murder, they don't curse. Can you rewrite the script and kind of give me something different? So he rewrites parts of it to take the violence out, but doesn't make it any better. And then I finally was like, look, I want you to this is what I want to challenge you with. I want you to scrap the storyline completely, and I want you to come up with something completely different that is this. And I think I even gave him like a story beats thing. And then he started arguing with me about whether it was an interesting story or not. And I was like, I just told Bill, I was like, how do I tell this guy to F himself and not say that? Because this was like, if you're trying to get a job, you shouldn't argue with the guy that's going to give you the job.
Right.
So I just said, like, look, you're the writer. Figure it out. That's the challenge that's what I'm challenging you to do.
That's your job.
Yeah.
The writer, you make it interesting.
And I never heard back from him.
Sometimes the trash sees itself out, and I don't mean that as an insult. Just, like meets like, right?
Yeah.
Oil and water separates itself. So the art that we showed earlier was very what Nick calls cape and cowl sort of superhero fiction. Do you guys play with other art styles? I know he's mentioned that he gets a lot over at Apogee submissions that want to do manga style art, which isn't what he does. Do you guys have that problem? Do you do multiple styles?
That I'm aware of, there's certainly a level of Bill does not want manga cartoony.
Okay.
He doesn't think that works. He doesn't particularly care for that kind of stuff. I'm indifferent to it. There's been a couple of the guys who we've found that like have a very stylized look, and as long as they can tell a story and it's not super jarring to the rest of the stuff that's happening here, there's a guy we've used on a couple things that I really like his work. It's very stylized, and it's like we'll see. We got to give him another thing to see how he does on that. But I think that's where we do. I think you just have to look at somebody's work and see what they do. And sometimes, like, cool, you can draw a cover. Cool, you can draw sequential art. But can you draw a sequential story from a script we gave you? Because that's also a challenge. Is like, if I say the car skids to a stop, can you draw the car skidding to a stop? Or can you just draw, can you tell this story? Because that's another, Nick will probably be able to tell more than me. I was like, that's another skill set. It's like, can you make somebody getting out of the car interesting? Can you make people having a meeting look interesting? Because you may be able to I could draw the coolest table, the coolest sink, and the coolest costume. But if it's boring to look at, that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a lot of ways to do that. A lot of it's how you manipulate the camera. And I know a lot of people hear me like, yeah, but you're drawing, there's no camera. I'm like, yeah, it is. I'm the camera.
Yeah.
So I'm the one that's going to be drawing it in perspective, and where I want to see where I place that camera. Like if I'm doing it from an anti-view looking up and it's slightly off center, which adds tension and drama to the panel. That's how you make a static scene is what we call them, stuff that's boring. It's like, hey, I'm picking up a phone, or I'm starting my car, or I'm sitting in my car, or I'm eating lunch. That's how you make those panels interesting, is where you place the camera.
Yeah.
And you can have it straight, anti-view looking up, and then you can tilt the camera a little bit. That adds a little tension to it. So there's a lot of tricks in there. That's why I always recommend the 5 C's of cinematography. I swear to God, I'm not getting a kickback from that book or anything. It's just a very valuable tool for artists and writers, because it gives you all those theories and concepts of how to make a shot interesting. And I'm sure you've read it, Matt.
No.
Being in the film, you never read it? Pick it up. It's amazing. I can't stress that enough.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's not a very big book, so it's probably about yay thick, but it's also kind of like this big.
But Nick, I like big books, and I cannot lie.
You other brothers can't
deny.
So you've mentioned, the art
big
style.
omnibus buses in your face. You get sorry,
you get sprung.
So the love guru speaks again. So do you guys ever do any that are black and white line drawing comics, or is it all colored?
Good.
All right, sorry about that. That technical snafu. Matthew is actually on the run from the police right now. Apparently, they get really mad when you put a donut on a string and you chase after them. I don't know what that's about. Nick would have just eaten the donut because he's chill like that. But these cops, they just didn't have a sense of humor. So what are you gonna do?
I have a great sense of humor. It makes my job more enjoyable.
Absolutely, and with all the weird people you interact with. But apparently, Matthew found the one that didn't have the sense of humor. So, he had to hide a little bit, the WITSEC thing, but he's back. So let's get back into his comics. So, Matthew, this is a question for you and Nick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Outstanding. So which is harder to work with when you're working with the overall production in comics? Is it harder to work with the artist because you got to tweak what they show, or the writer who writes the scripts for you?
It's hard to work with people that don't like critiques and can't understand why you're giving them correction. Again, like look, it can be the coolest script in the world, but if it doesn't fit within the confines of whatever universe it is, it doesn't matter if it's the best script in the world. Look, if I make coolest Iron Man script and then send it to Nick and go like, dude, this is Quick Wire's issue 2, and he's like, bro, it's a speedster book.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's a great Iron Man
Why
or
does he have
armored
rockets
guy
on his feet all of a sudden?
Yeah. Why is it Exo Mana War?
Yeah.
So I think that's what a lot of people, especially like writers, is like, hey, write what this universe is. And you can push the envelope, or you can kind of do different things within the world, but you have to be able to write for the world. And I think that's where a lot of these writers sometimes, again, I was talking about before with a guy who wanted to argue with me about, well, how is that interesting? Bro, that's your job to make that interesting.
Yeah.
How is it interesting about two guys in a martial arts fight who get trapped in a building? That doesn't sound interesting. Well, I hope I made it interesting. You guys will find out when the book comes out,
Yeah.
But
because that's my job, is to make it interesting.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the challenge. And then the only other challenge, like with artists, is sometimes it's kind of funny. It's like sometimes language barriers, depending on where your artist is from,
Okay.
can have an issue. I told the story on a different podcast, but I'll tell it here. Is like there was a panel where it's like, he's watching his mother's coffin go into the, get dropped into the hole in the ground at her funeral. And I think he's from like Central America, and he had no idea what that was. Like, that's not how they bury people there. Like whatever funeral traditions we have here, they don't have there. So he had to look it up as to what I was talking about. Or I've done this a couple of times of like, I have this panel in my mind and I'm like, he's standing on the side. So here's what it's a character called Point Blank, and he has, he can stick to things, kind of like a Spider-Man-ish power, but he's an archer. So he's kind of like the perfect hitman. He can stand on the side of a building, snipe off something, run on the other side, and take off. And I wrote on this panel, he's standing on the side of a building, about to fire an arrow into the distance. And something about that didn't make sense to the artist. So I had to get tape and tape one of my son's action figures to a door frame, and then set up boxes farther down and put other action and take the picture. And then he was like, oh, that's what that is. That I see now. So it's funny. There's literally a panel in Point Blank's 2-page origin that is this, 8-ball action figure. I think he was from Apex figure line or whatever, duct taped to a wall to kind of get, this is what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And sometimes just because I'm making up the most random crap ever.
That's actually kind of cool, because what you just described essentially is using what the military we call sand tables to describe the action to your artist. I still do that when I plan battles in the books I write. So it's a good way to get a 3D representation of what you're trying to describe, when sometimes words don't always help you. So I really like that. I know maybe I'm just a little bit weird, because I wrote my first published work was writing in other people's universe. So I always understood when it's work for hire and you're writing in their world, like they get the final say. So I never started writing with the, my words are too precious or my ideas are too special. And when you come at it from the academic side, you expect to be argued with, right? Yeah. So like, I don't understand some of these artists that are like, no, it's so precious. I'm like, okay, but if the readers or the boss doesn't like it, doesn't matter. Fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've heard others.
This is what it is.
Yeah, you got to be able to take critiques, and you can't have thin skin. You're in the commercial art business.
Oh, if you think that's hard, wait till you get the reviews and some of the things they say.
I got a review on my very first couple of issues of Phantom Hawk from Volume 1. I don't release them anymore. And this dude shredded me. Like he's like, you know that friend in 8th grade that draws kind of okay, and he says he wants to make a comic, and you tell him he probably shouldn't do that, and then he goes ahead and does it anyway. Yeah, that's Nick Garber's Phantom Hawk right now, and I'm like, damn.
Tell us how you really feel.
It's like, dude, like the guy like ripped my heart out, chopped my hands off, threw it all in a blender, and then spit it down my throat, and I was like, yeah, that's fair. I didn't, because those earlier issues, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a pinup artist. I had to learn to be a sequential artist. I had to learn a new skill to do that. Quite a lot of stuff. Just because I've read comics my whole life doesn't mean I know what the hell I'm doing. You got people out there that that have read comic books for the longest time, 20, 30 years, and they think they're writers. You know, it doesn't work that way. You have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So when I got that review, someone sent it to me, was like, this dude shredded you. And I went and I read it, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to need a drink to read the rest of this shit. So I had a bourbon, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to post it on my own page. So I posted on my Facebook page, and I got a lot of compliments on that. Like, man, that takes some balls, dude, because that dude shredded you. And I'm like, I know, but he was fair in many points. He could have worded it a little different, but that's not up to me.
Yeah.
You know, the message was, I need to do better. So all I did, instead of being butthurt, I'm like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's never made a comic book before. You know, a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
You know, they get offended. And I was like, nope, he had some valid points. I'm gonna work on this, and then I'm gonna shove that next issue down his throat.
Well, a lot of times people have trouble understanding that readers don't always, and this would apply to comics, I'm sure, don't always understand. Like they say this doesn't work, and they tell you it doesn't work. They don't always understand the why. So sometimes if they feel certain ways, well, what they're really trying to tell you is your pacing was off or your action wasn't believable. And you have to, as a creative type, be able to read between the lines of what they're communicating so you can use it to get better. And sometimes people are just jerks. And if you follow, like on Amazon's Perfect, you see what else they review and you realize they've read some of the best stuff out there and everything is a 1-star to them. And then you're like, nah, okay, this guy doesn't count.
Well, you also... Sorry, and you also have some of those guys where it's like, I've learned this, especially doing some of the podcast stuff, is like just because I don't like something doesn't mean it sucks.
Right.
You know, like I don't ever want to see There Will Be Blood again. It doesn't mean it's a crappy movie. Doesn't mean it sucks. It's just not my kind of thing. You know, or something like Tank Girl. Like that's just not my thing. I feel like it's a bad movie, but it's not, because there's people who love that movie. And I think sometimes you get caught up in like, you know, is Black Cobra the coolest comic that everyone's ever written? No, you know, I feel like it's a pretty good thing that I've done, but there's also people who are probably going to look at it and go like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes you have to take those punches and realize like they may not even understand it's not for them, or like something like, you know, I made fun of the sequel trilogy earlier. Like, are those bad movies? It's arguable, but like
they're pretty movies.
Like, is The Last Jedi really as bad as a lot of people say, or is it just not what we wanted?
No, if somebody comes to my house and says that The Last Jedi was the greatest part of the series, I'm going to firmly yet politely ask them to leave.
Oh yeah, no, I agree, but I think that's what happens sometimes is like, you know, we watch a show or we watch something or read something. It's like, well, what I really wanted to happen was this. Does that mean that thing is bad, or it's just not what you wanted to happen? And I think that sometimes is something for me is like, you know, my co-host on this podcast I do now, he always makes fun of me. He's like, you just like things, please. And I'm like, I can't. If they don't make any logical sense, it gets on my nerves. I'm sorry. Yeah. You know, I can't, sometimes I can get on the ride and sometimes I can't, you know, and I think that's where, you know, something like Honest Trailers, that YouTube show, that's hilarious because they show all the things. And sometimes as writers, we have to go, okay, we have to make this all make sense. And it also has to be entertaining. And I think that's where
the one I like is How It Should Have Ended.
Yeah. How It Should Have Ended. Oh yeah. Where they just like, so I think that's what happens sometimes is sometimes it is we need to be better, and sometimes as a filmmaker, you just have to go, or a comic writer, like, yeah, it's just not for them. And sometimes people have to do that in their reviews. Is like, you know, look, I don't watch those Hallmark movies. They're not my thing. I don't know
My
if they
wife
suck.
loves the
I haven't
hell out of
watched
them,
them.
though. Yeah,
Huh?
but someone enjoys
Yeah.
them. My wife loves the hell out of them.
They keep making them, so somebody's got to be giving them.
As bad as it
But
is, Sharknado's gotten 6 versions of it, and people still watch it. So there's something for everybody.
Yeah. So
well, Fast
All
and
right, so
Furious, they jumped the car into outer space, and they made another one after that.
Makes me feel better about my own writing is all I'm going to say.
yeah.
So with that being said, speaking about writing, we've gone all over the industry. We've nerded out over comics. Nick's happy. We've done our due diligence to give him his, seasonal comic book. Although I think this is number 3 about comics. No, 4, because we talked about your comics.
Yeah. My street cred is established now. My pedigree is established.
Yeah, and so we're looking to do more of the comics. Unfortunately, most comics, it just seems it's all about the Kickstarter model, and if you don't catch it in time, it's not available to you. Which when booking is a thing, sometimes that makes it really hard to get those people.
Yeah, and crowdfunding is, because we're not all independently wealthy, and to make a comic is pretty damn expensive. So that's why we always do the Kickstarter model or the crowdfunding model. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's hard to do booking because we do so many episodes in advance, and we have them all slotted what day and what time they're going to release. This one it'll be released tomorrow. I believe, right, JR?
Yeah, this episode will go out tomorrow. I've got some editing to do, but it'll go out
Maybe
tomorrow.
Sunday at the latest. I don't know. It will be released here in the next 48 hours.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go back. We're going to throw that art from the Kickstarter back on the screen. Oh, hold on.
Give me some more art, JR.
There we go.
Y'all got any more of that art stuff?
Yeah, so we showed all the art we grabbed. We wanted to leave you a reason to go look at the Kickstarter page because there's more art there, and then to back it so you can read it. If we show you all the cool stuff in this, you've got no reason to buy it. So
and it's fully funded, so you're going to get the book. I know
that's right. It did fully fund. So first, let's start about what are the perks. Obviously, every Kickstarter has a base and then tiers that you can do. So what can we expect from this Kickstarter? What are your tiers?
Are you asking me? Scroll so I can read them. No.
We'll read along with you.
Yeah, no, there's 3 digital tiers. Digital tiers are basically, I'm buying this book and I know I'm going to get a PDF once I receive it. I believe it's like 5, 15, and 35. And then as the price increases, you get more than just Black Cobra #1, or it goes into the Black Cobra Extended Edition, which has a couple more storylines in it. You also have like the actual physical copies, and that starts at $15. So if you want to get the comic book in your hand, the base price is going to be $15. And then it goes up from there. And again, depending on the tier, you will get, pardon me, you'll get other issues that have come out about the character and maybe some of the other comics from Grunt Comics. And then there's a couple interesting ones as they get higher up. There's one, I believe it's listed at $150, maybe $200, where if you have your own original character and you want them to be in one of the comics, you pay this money and we'll put one of your characters in there. And then there's one, I think it's at $300, and it's basically like, we will put you in as if you're a character of the comic in our what's called the secret files, which is just a single page kind of roster, like Marvel Universe, the old Marvel Universe books, where it's like name, origin, state, blah, powers, blah, blah. We will do that for you personally. And then we had this really random, crazy idea. And I almost want to say it's kind of a joke of like, hey, if you're willing to back $1,000 tier, we will put you in the comics and you will have a storyline and you'll be part of the lore. And 3 different people backed that thing.
Wow.
And it was just one of those random, like, what? I mean, I made it as kind of a pseudo joke, and because Bill's like, I don't think anybody's going to do that. I'm like, it's not going to cost us any more money to put it out there. And yeah, it's because I think what happens a lot of times is you have a lot of these people who are just, look, if you're trying to get a tax write-off, you don't want to do a $15 or a $50 tier. You want to drop some big lump sum of money and go about your day or see what happens. Or maybe they just really want to be in a comic book. So it was really interesting to see that happen, especially on day one. but that's kind of how those different tiers work, and it gives you we've blasted through a couple of stretch goals, and now we're now having to create stretch goals that are way beyond this, just so we have, and stretch goals being